Amagi Metals, where financial freedom is yours.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Amagi Metals YouTube channel. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Andy Hoffman, the Marketing Director and Media Director for Miles Franklin. He's also well known in the precious metals world as Ranting Andy. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. Andy is very well versed in the precious metals world, has been with Miles. Well, Miles Franklin has been around now for 25 years. Andy, you've been with them for
three.
So
Yes.
Last time we talked to Andy was last year, and we were talking a lot about Silver Circle, the movie that I was working for at the time, and tailoring this wealth preservation message to younger generations. And you've been working for Miles Franklin for now 3 years, and since the last time we talked, I'm just wondering if you think anything has changed. Last time we were talking about getting younger people more into the mindset of saving, because I think that is a value and tradition that has been lost over the past decade or so.
Yes, well, it's difficult enough getting the older people to understand it, those people who have been around for decades of inflation, let alone the major inflation scares that we had in the 1970s and subsequent times, heck, even 2008 when oil went to $150 a barrel. It's a very simple concept. It's the difference between savings and investment. We can't be more vociferous about it. Gold and silver have never been investments. I mean, yes, you can have what I call paper PM investments like mining shares and ETFs and closed-end funds and certificates, which are investments. But when you talk about real money, what you used to think of as the money in your bank account, they are savings. In other words, growing up, when you put your money in the bank, you had no fears that it would be bailed out or bailed in. You got paid a reasonable amount of interest. And, of course, inflation was not what it is today now that the money printing explosion has accelerated. If you just hold your precious metals, over time, over thousands of years of time, they have been the only substances that have defined real money. That is, they are not just fungible and a medium of exchange, but they're also a store of value, and that's the most important part. So I would say educating everyone is the most important part and most important thing that I do. That the time that when you talk about fiat currency systems, which always destroy themselves, and we're near the end of this one. It's 4 decades old and clearly starting to collapse. This is the narrow window you have to convert your money, your currency, to savings that's immutable.
And one of the ways I tend to explain that to younger generations, typically I'm talking to people that are, around 35 years of age and younger. I tell them about your savings account in the bank is actually losing its value because the rate of inflation is working much faster than your rate of interest in your savings account, and that precious metals can help you avoid this loss. Is that something that you tend to use, or do you have any other angles that you work with whenever talking to people about moving their money to a safer haven?
Educating people about the concept of inflation is one of the most difficult out there. It's one of the most poorly reported and poorly understood economic concepts, which should be what they teach you in Economics 101. It simply means the printing of money. The changes in prices are just the symptom of the monetary inflation. And what you typically see is that the things that you need versus want are the things that go up in value the most. Whereas because an iPhone is going down, that doesn't mean that there is, quote, deflation. That's just technology in action. The things you need to live on are all going up in value. The cost of living per se, food, energy, insurance, tuition, you name it. Anything that you need is going up. And, of course, salaries have not gone up with it. So I just try to talk about inflation in general, and real incomes have inevitably been declining since we went off the gold standard, and that people need to realize that this will only accelerate in time because, by definition, fiat currencies are Ponzi schemes. And Ponzi scheme is a very often loosely stated term to say, oh, well, you're just picking on it because it sounds bad. No, a Ponzi scheme means something that must grow exponentially larger to survive, and it must do so by maintaining confidence in the system, which is why we've seen an unprecedented level of money printing, much of it covert, market manipulation, and propaganda, particularly in the last 5 years, since, the way I put it, the global financial system broke. It became oversaturated with debt and derivatives and broke permanently. And so the system is dying, and right now you're just seeing the remnants of it held together by the smoke and mirrors that I was just talking about. And the thing is, Americans are so secular that while we're just being kind of boiled like frogs in a pot, and we get some of that inflation back with entitlements from the government and subsidies and too big to fail bailouts, most of the world doesn't have the reserve currency. In fact, all of it. So they aren't able to offset any of it. What they are seeing is dramatic increases in inflation, while we just see modest increases in inflation. Of course, I wouldn't really call it modest here, but compared to what we're seeing in South America, in the Middle East, the whole Arab Spring, which is now kind of spreading around the world, believe me, it's no coincidence what's going on in Iraq and the Gaza Strip and the Ukraine. This is all a function of central bank money printing in its exponential stage, which will only grow larger. I mean, look, the European Central Bank just went to negative interest rates. They promised that they have $1 trillion QE package sitting right behind it. Today they announced Italy's in a recession, Germany's economy is collapsing, France's is collapsing. They're going to accelerate theirs just like Japan. Japan started their Abenomics program a year and a half ago to double the money supply. Well, they're going to have a 6.5% GDP plunge this quarter, and they're going to have to make another decision when Abenomics runs out in 6 months. So again, you're going to see the same thing everywhere. And then the whole coup de grace will be when whirly bird Janet has to give up on her, pretending that there's a recovery and tapering and all that. Because when the U.S. Explodes with its next round of QE, it's going to be all over. And if you haven't protected yourself then, it's going to be too late.
Right, and going a little bit more into the Federal Reserve's most recent announcements, which I just call it the broken record speech, they're cutting back on stimulus. They've cut back $10 billion monthly, and they're keeping the interest rates at zero, all the while we've had this 4% growth in the U.S. economy. So I just feel like these wishy-washy policies just coincide with wishy-washy statements. So I'm just wondering what's next from the Fed. Are we going to just keep hearing the same thing, or are they just going to have to eventually tighten up?
The Fed, no, they're never tightening up. The Fed, just like the ECB, they are governed completely by markets. They couldn't care less what happens in the economy, and they certainly haven't. Neither have they helped the economy, or do they have the power to help it. All they care about is financial markets. If they can succeed by printing money overtly and covertly and through the too big to fail banks supporting stock markets so that it looks like things are not falling apart, they won't do anything. They'll keep slowly but surely tapering, but they can't raise rates ever. We have the historic debt edifice around the world, which is only growing larger. And by the way, even they know the real economy is not improving. I mean, I wrote an article, 4% World, the other day debunking the 4%. I mean, I've written constantly about the island of lies, that is the jobs numbers. I mean, you don't even need to be a rocket scientist to see this. The real economy is at its all-time low. I mean, today the trade deficit ex-oil is at its worst level ever. And, of course, the Baltic Dry Index, all-time low. You look around the world, there is no cash flow support of saying that there's 4% growth. Everyone knows it. So as long as the markets hold together, they'll pretend that they're tapering, and but they'll still have to keep interest rates at zero. And ultimately, when they get, just like when they got to the 6.5% unemployment rate and then said, oh, no, we're not going to raise rates, we'll just change that, the same thing will happen when, look, they just hit 2% inflation, and now they're not raising rates. And if anything, any of their fake numbers increase again, the same thing will happen. They can never, ever raise interest rates. And as for tapering, I wrote a piece last year called Proof of the Tapering Mirage, meaning they were lying. They were never cutting at $40 billion a month. They were cutting $100 billion a month because there was upward pressure on rates. But now that there's downward pressure on rates, which I call the most damning proof yet of QE failure, they actually, I believe, are tapering. In fact, I think they're selling en masse because they're so terrified that the world knows QE to infinity is coming, that they're buying bonds left and right. The point is, they can't win because the economy can't get better. And the more that they report that ridiculous numbers like 4%, the more it's going to reduce their credibility. Ultimately, I don't really care what the Fed says. The Fed says they're doing with QE. They're never going to be able to reverse the strategy, and inevitably they're going to have to increase the amount of overt money printing. They'll always be covertly printing, but at some point markets will not cooperate with them, and they'll be forced to print, say we're doing QE 4, 5, 6 until the dollar crashes.
Right. And going back to where we began with this is the idea of explaining this to people. And obviously much of what the Fed is talking about is lip service. And the most important thing to focus on is the fact that they are printing money, and people need to understand that in order to guard your savings, you have to look into things that don't have an infinite supply like gold and silver. And that's a lot of the times how I try to explain it to just anyone that has any questions about it, especially here at Amagi. When people are calling, we have first-time buyers that'll call in and ask all of these exact questions that we're bringing up here. And what is some of the recommendations you typically have for newbies? I typically recommend, 10-ounce bars. Junk silver is a great place to start. What are some recommendations from you?
Well, first off, I'll say if you're talking about, there's an old adage, don't fight the Fed. Now, that adage typically people people in the precious metals world don't realize that's referring to investments. If you're talking about stocks and bonds, if the Fed says they're going to print infinite amounts of money and buy them, well, it's probably a smart idea to front-run them, which is exactly what the hot money has done. But when you're talking about savings, the phrase should be the exact opposite. You should fight the Fed with as hard as you can. If the Fed says they're going to print money, you go the opposite direction. You buy real items of value, starting with physical gold and silver. They will destroy the currencies, just as every central bank in the world has. We've already lost several currencies in this country, and people don't realize that. And it will happen again here. As for the actual purchase of metal, it's pretty simple. It's not rocket science. When you talk about gold coins, there's barely any choices out there. I mean, you have the 6 major mints, and there's really not much else, and that's what we would recommend. You have a portfolio weighted, or at least a core portfolio of those most liquid assets out there, the ones people know, the American Eagles, the Canadian Maple Leafs, the Austrian Philharmonics. In silver, you have a few more choices out there. There are definitely more generics. But, you're not going to lose if you own, for instance, 1-ounce coins. That's all I own. I think they're the most liquid and the most practical. And I would start with, gold, the silver eagles. Maybe absolutely everyone should have a little bit of junk silver in case that worst-case bartering scenario comes about. Plus, it's silver. I mean, it's reasonably priced silver. So that's, my, quote, recommendations. But the biggest recommendation really is just to get started. Heck, once you touch a physical gold or silver coin, put it in one hand, and then in the other hand, put a quarter, which feels like it's a feather, and you'll realize how little intrinsic value that quarter has compared to the blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting those scarce, and I do mean scarce, gold and silver coins out of the earth.
Right. And I want to hear a little bit more. I read an article that you put out recently about gold and silver as money, because I do run into that a lot whenever I'm talking to new investors and explaining to them that gold and silver coins and or rounds are a great place to put your money into as a safe haven. And they always come back to me and say, well, gold's never going to be money. Silver's never going to be money. There's never going to be a gold standard. And I know you recently wrote about that, and I kind of wanted to dig in a little bit about it.
Right. Well, the article I just wrote, among many, because I write every day, was called Is Gold Money? Who Cares? And the point being that I don't own, and I have pretty much my entire liquid net worth in physical gold and silver. I don't own it because I have dreams of some utopian gold standard down the road, whether it's backed by the Chinese yuan or a new dollar or Bitcoin or who knows what. I really don't care. I only live for one lifetime, and I'm halfway done. My goal is to preserve my net worth. And the defining characteristic of gold and silver as money that no other form of currency has is its storage of value. So, yes, we are going to have a collapse of the current system at some point in the future, perhaps the very near future, the way things are going. And from the ashes, we will have a new system, whatever that may be. For people who say we'll never have a gold standard, I think that's pretty short-sighted, given that every single fiat currency system failure, which is every single fiat currency system, has been followed by a new gold standard of some sort. I think that's a pretty short-sighted statement to make. But again, it really doesn't matter to me because when the fiat currencies inevitably decline further and then eventually collapse completely, my gold and silver will preserve my net worth through that time, and then when there's a new system, I will be the one who's doing better than everyone else. At the least, I'll be able to preserve my net worth and pass it down to my daughter. So I don't really care about whether it's gold and silver. The point is that it's going to save you from what's been occurring. I mean, gold and silver have been the best performing assets since the dollar peaked and the euro peaked and the yen peaked at the turn of the century, and they will continue to be as the current monetary system collapses and the cartels that suppress the prices below the cost of production fail, just like the London gold pool and every other attempt to contain gold and silver prices over the generations.
Right, and we are constantly talking about the future of the dollar, and something that's more recently entered into the marketplace is cryptocurrencies, and a lot of people see that as opposed instead of fighting the dollar, it's actually transcending the dollar. So my personal opinion, and here at Amagi, we really see a bright future for Bitcoin and other digital currencies, and that one day they will become money. They will be used to exchange between different people. And as technology evolves more and more, I'm just wondering, as a revered person in the precious metals world, what your opinion on Bitcoin is, and have you used it?
Well, yes, I've certainly been forced to pay attention to it, especially because last year you had that brief moment in time where its initial surge in interest coincided with the biggest precious metals raid that I can recall. So you had a lot of people saying, well, Bitcoin is the new gold, it's taking over for gold, when in fact they're two entirely different things, but both working parallel. That is, they're both working against the fiat currency system. They're both, they are both working potentially to be new currencies that transactions are made of and storage of value. I think one must certainly separate the concept of investment and payment platform systems, because in time, I don't know what the next currency will be. We may well have a Bitcoin-based transaction system worldwide. It probably will take some time, but it certainly is a possibility. We may have another gold standard. There's a better odds of that based on history, but it doesn't mean it will happen that way. But either way, both of them are alternative currencies, no matter how you look at it. And I do believe that when this current cartel suppression starts to lose ground, which frankly could be any day the way things are going, I expect that you're going to see a significant increase in interest in the Bitcoin community. And again, I'm separating the word interest from investment because I don't know if that means Bitcoin explodes to $2,000 a coin. I really don't know. I just know that there's going to be a whole lot of interest in anything that's not fiat currency related when what's coming down the road like a runaway train hits us. And believe me, the odds of that happening now as opposed to sometime in the future have never been greater.
And what is some of the reaction you've been getting from some of the older clients and customers at Miles Franklin in regards to Bitcoin?
Oh, well, older customers are not going to even pay attention to it. They don't need to. Again, like myself, I talk about my lifetime. I don't really care about what the next currency system will be like. I just want to preserve my wealth. And it really doesn't matter if the next currency system is Bitcoin-based or Chinese yuan, gold-based. It doesn't matter. And if you're an older person and you're really set in your ways and you have a lesser time horizon, the last thing you're going to be thinking about is what the future currencies will be. I don't necessarily think people are not technology savvy. I just don't think people relate to things that don't matter to them. Because let's face it, whether Bitcoin is going to be something of the future, it's not going to be something of the future tomorrow. I mean, it's going to take time. There's going to be most importantly, you're going to have a collapse of the current system, which is going to cause chaos around the world for some time. But the younger you are, the more likely you are to be embracing the concept of what may happen in the future. And and people, of course, must be very careful of how they are going to play that. Are you going to, if you think of it like, well, I think Bitcoin will be the next payment system, so I'm just going to put all my money into Bitcoin's quote stock. That's a dangerous way of doing it, as opposed to diversifying out of fiat currencies, considering ways that you may be able to capitalize on the growth in the Bitcoin community. I mean, nothing is set in stone, but I do believe you're going to see some dramatic changes in the whole global financial landscape in a very short order of time.
Something analogy we like to draw too at the same time is smartphones. So sometimes there are times when I think we're actually going to wake up tomorrow and Bitcoin is going to be a very popular payment system, because there was once when you had these heavy cell phones that didn't do much, and now you have these small cell phones that do everything that your desktop computer can do and more. There's just so many benefits. International business can be done much easier with Bitcoin. However, the point in the beginning of this whole discussion was the importance of learning about savings and learning about alternative currency, because regardless, we have a system right now that isn't working, that isn't going to work, and you've put it so eloquently. If you want to share maybe with the listeners some other places for people to read your articles, because I know you have just a wealth of knowledge that people can tap into.
We've had so many thousands of years of failed fiat currency systems, and this is going to be the largest fiat currency collapse in the history of mankind. It's a global collapse, and there's going to be more people impacted by it. So people really do need to look to the future about what may happen, but they must start, of course, with how they're going to preserve the value of their net worth when we get through the ugly transition time. And again, I'm at Miles Franklin. We've been around 25 years. We put out a free blog every single day, milesfranklin.com, or you can email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Andy, and we'll definitely be talking with you again soon.
Okay, I look forward to it.